June 15, 1944, Saipan. Just after dawn. The sea churns with smoke, waves slapping against steel landing craft. Marines press forward under naval bombardment, the air thick with cordite and salt. Broken palms line the shoreline. For a moment, the terrain seems still, but the pillboxes speak. Machine guns open from concrete slits. Bullets rake the beach. Marines drop instinctively, moving low, scanning for angles that don't exist. A single squad begins to advance. Methodical, learned from every battle across the Pacific. One bunker falls, then another. By morning, it is clear. This fight is about what lies beneath Saipan, and why taking it will reshape the war. By summer 1944, the Pacific War had reached a critical hinge. The U.S., from desperate holding actions in 1942, had advanced methodically across thousands of miles. Guadalcanal tested resolve. Tarawa exposed brutal lessons. Kwajalein and Eniwetok proved those lessons were learned at enormous cost. Now, Saipan, a small island with immense strategic value, stood in the center of everything. Saipan, part of the Mariana Islands, was Japan's inner defense ring. Losing it meant American bombers could reach Tokyo, Osaka, and other major industrial centers. For Japan, the stakes were existential. For the U.S., capturing it offered a platform for decisive pressure. Japanese defense embraced depth over mobility. Pillboxes, trenches, tunnels, all designed to bleed Americans inland. Marines knew these defenses existed. Maps and reconnaissance revealed ridges and villages, but not the tunnels beneath. Invasion plans fell under Admiral Spruance's 5th Fleet and General Holland M. Smith's 5 Amphibious Corps. Experienced 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions would land. Yet even seasoned troops felt the weight. Saipan would be fought position by position. Each pillbox, each ridge, would test discipline, courage, and initiative. By June, Saito commanded 30,000 defenders. Pillboxes and tunnels interlinked across ridges. Beaches lightly held, killing grounds inland. Japanese doctrine prioritized endurance and sacrifice over survival. Withdrawal was forbidden. Americans approached cautiously. Naval and aerial bombardment had weakened infrastructure, but fortifications remained. As Marines pushed inland, Japanese defenses activated. Machine guns, mortars, tunnels, all converged on small units. Progress slowed to yards. The first day revealed the reality. Saipan would not fall quickly. It would be taken one bunker at a time, through skill, courage, and adaptation. On the ground, divisions and regiments faded into insignificance. Squads became the instruments of progress. Each yard gained was personal. Marines advanced under fire, reading terrain, adjusting to unseen pillboxes. Losses were immediate. Squad cohesion and improvisation determined survival. Pillboxes were not random. Low, reinforced, camouflaged. Interlocking fields of fire. Japanese doctrine anticipated American tactics. Marines countered with suppression, movement, and destruction. Each structure took minutes, sometimes hours, to reduce. For Japanese defenders, endurance mattered more than survival. Orders forbade withdrawal. Yet Americans adapted rapidly. Pillboxes fell. Crews died in place. Defenders faced the stark realization. The Americans would not break. They would dismantle. Technology worked at hand's length. Flamethrowers forced defenders back. Explosives sealed bunkers. Artillery isolated positions. Coordination turned tools into decisive instruments. Concrete survived shells, but not methodical assault. Leadership at the squad level drove progress. American initiative contrasted Japanese rigidity. Junior leaders identified blind spots, coordinated attacks, and repeated successes across sectors. Momentum built through decentralized decision-making. Moral frameworks shaped every action. Japanese refusal to retreat accelerated destruction. American forces balanced survival with mission completion. The collapse of resistance was as much psychological as physical. By the fourth day of fighting, 17 interconnected pillboxes blocked Marine progress entirely. 17 positions, staggered across uneven ground, interlinked by trenches and crawl tunnels, covered one another with disciplined fields of fire. Attempts to advance stalled within minutes. Casualties mounted. For a time, the line did not move at all. The response was deliberate. Marine commanders isolated the sector. Artillery was brought forward. Naval gunfire shifted to cut off supporting areas. Smoke was laid to obscure observation. Assault teams were reorganized, reinforced with engineers, flamethrower operators, and additional machine guns. This was not an impulsive charge. It was preparation for systematic destruction. At first light, suppression began. Every visible embrasure was engaged simultaneously. Rifles and BARs fired to pin, not kill. Machine guns hammered openings until barrels overheated. Under this cover, assault teams advanced in short rushes, hugging terrain, closing distances measured in feet. The first pillbox fell to fire and explosives. A flamethrower burst, forced defenders back, followed by a satchel charge that collapsed the firing port. The position went silent. Marines marked it and moved on. A second resisted longer. Grenades were ineffective against thick concrete. Only when a charge was placed directly against the opening did the firing stop. As the morning wore on, the pattern repeated. Each pillbox demanded focus. Each consumed time and ammunition. Progress was slow, but unmistakable. With every destroyed position, the interlocking network weakened. Fields of fire fractured. Supporting bunkers were exposed. Japanese defenders attempted to respond with mortar fire and localized counterattacks through tunnels, but coordination faltered. Communications had been severed. Leadership within the network had been eliminated early. By midday, more than half the positions were neutralized. The fight did not crescendo. It ground forward. Heat built. Smoke hung low. Marines rotated men forward and back, sustaining pressure without overextension. There were no dramatic charges, only the steady application of force. As the last cluster of pillboxes came under attack, Japanese resistance hardened. Fire intensified. Ammunition was expended without restraint. This was the final line in the sector. And both sides knew it. When the 16th position fell, only one remained. It fired until the end. The final pillbox sat slightly higher than the others, anchored into a fold of ground that overlooked the approach routes below. Its concrete face had been scarred by hours of fire. Still, it continued to fire in short, controlled bursts, measured, deliberate, defiant. By this stage, Japanese defenders inside understood their situation clearly. There were no adjacent positions left to support them. The tunnels that once connected the network were either collapsed or sealed. No orders were coming. What remained was obligation. Marine assault teams approached with practiced caution. Suppression fire resumed, denying the defenders any opportunity to reassert control. Pin, move, close. A flamethrower operator advanced under cover of smoke. When the stream of fire entered the embrasure, gunfire ceased. Flames and smoke filled the interior. Marines waited, ready for movement that never came. A demolition charge followed. The explosion collapsed part of the structure inward, sealing the opening. When the dust cleared, the pillbox was silent. 17 fortified positions had been reduced in sequence. The effect on the surrounding battlefield was immediate. With the last anchor neutralized, the ground it had dominated opened for movement. Marine units advanced without encountering lethal crossfire. What had taken days to penetrate now yielded in hours. Japanese resistance in adjacent sectors weakened rapidly. Without the anchor of intact fortifications, remaining defenders were forced into exposed positions or isolated pockets. Mortar fire became sporadic. Counterattacks lost coherence. The defensive system, once carefully layered, had unraveled. Reports moved up the Marine chain of command with restrained clarity. The breakthrough was real. The cost had been significant, but the position was secured. What mattered most was not the number of pillboxes destroyed, but what their fall represented: the failure of a doctrine that relied on immobility against an enemy capable of adaptation. As Marine units consolidated the captured ground and prepared to push deeper into the island, the character of the battle changed. The fight was no longer about whether Saipan could be held, but how long resistance could continue before collapse spread across the island. The destruction of the pillbox network marked a decisive shift in the battle for Saipan. What followed was not an immediate end to fighting, but a steady unraveling of Japanese defensive cohesion across the island. Positions that had once anchored entire sectors were gone. Without them, remaining units were forced into improvised defenses that lacked depth, protection, or coordination. Casualty figures reflected the nature of the fighting. U.S. forces paid heavily for each yard gained. Thousands of Marines and soldiers were killed or wounded during the campaign. Many in close-quarters combat against fortified positions. Losses were not abstract numbers. They were felt at the squad and platoon level, where replacements were scarce and exhaustion constant. Japanese casualties were far more severe. Entire defensive units ceased to exist. Pillbox crews were annihilated in place. By the time organized resistance began to collapse, Japanese losses had reached catastrophic levels, both from combat and from the consequences of isolation. Food and water stocks dwindled rapidly. Medical care was almost non-existent. The psychological impact on surviving Japanese defenders was profound. The belief that fortifications could hold indefinitely had been disproven. Reports described American units advancing with confidence, methodically reducing positions once thought impregnable. For defenders trained to expect eventual American exhaustion, this persistence was disorienting. Marine units adapted their tactics further as they advanced. Lessons learned in one sector were immediately applied in the next. Pillboxes were identified faster. Assault teams moved with greater coordination. Supporting fire became more precise. What had begun as a brutal learning process evolved into an efficient, if costly, system of advance. As resistance thinned, Japanese command attempted localized counterattacks, including night infiltration and banzai charges. These actions, though ferocious, lacked the support necessary to regain lost ground. They resulted in heavy Japanese casualties without altering the strategic trajectory of the battle. By late June, American forces controlled most of Saipan's western and central areas. Airfield construction began even as fighting continued elsewhere. Engineers worked under intermittent fire, carving runways into ground only recently contested. The island was not yet secure. Pockets of resistance remained in the north. But the outcome was no longer in question. What remained was the final cost and the broader consequences of Saipan's fall, which would extend far beyond the battlefield itself. The capture of Saipan had immediate and far-reaching consequences, both strategically and psychologically. For the United States, the victory provided airfields within range of Japan's home islands. B-29 superfortresses could now reach Tokyo, Osaka, and other major industrial centers, shifting the war from attrition on isolated islands to the threat of sustained strategic bombing. The operational calculus of the Pacific War changed overnight. For Japanese leadership, the fall of Saipan was a shock of unprecedented magnitude. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo faced severe criticism within the imperial cabinet. The loss signaled that Japan's inner defense ring, once thought invulnerable, could be breached. Japanese morale at the command level fractured. Local commanders on other islands were forced to reassess defensive postures under the shadow of American air supremacy. Strategic planning had to account for a capability that had previously existed only in theory. American bombers striking directly at the homeland from captured territory. On the battlefield, the Marines consolidated gains while Japanese forces were pushed into remaining pockets. The relentless reduction of fortified positions demonstrated not only the lethal effectiveness of combined arms tactics, but also the adaptability of infantry operating under extreme stress. The fall of each pillbox had set a precedent. It showed that rigid defense could be systematically dismantled, and that numerical superiority could be multiplied by tactical ingenuity and disciplined execution. Human suffering was undeniable. Thousands of Japanese soldiers died defending positions to the last man. Civilians caught in the fighting faced starvation, artillery fire, and the chaos of collapsing defenses. Reports from the U.S. command detailed the grim conditions in isolated pockets, highlighting the costs of unyielding defense in contrast with the methodical advance of Marine forces. The operational aftermath extended beyond the battlefield. Saipan became a staging ground for subsequent invasions across the Marianas, including Tinian and Guam. The ability to project power from these islands altered Japanese defensive calculations and forced a reactive posture across the Pacific. Japanese commanders could no longer dictate the tempo of war. They were forced to respond to American initiative at every turn. Moreover, the psychological impact on the Japanese population and military hierarchy was profound. The once sacred doctrine of immovable, honor-bound defense had been shattered by persistent, calculated assault. Japanese soldiers and officers observed the Americans' combination of small unit initiative, technological application, and coordinated firepower, realizing that entrenched positions alone could no longer dictate the outcome of battle. The shift from defense to inevitability would define the remainder of the Pacific campaign. On the American side, the victory at Saipan reinforced confidence in doctrine, training, and leadership. The integration of infantry, engineers, artillery, and air support validated months of preparation. Lessons learned on Saipan: how to systematically reduce fortified positions, manage casualties under fire, and maintain operational momentum would be applied in every subsequent Pacific assault, from Guam to Iwo Jima and Okinawa. By the end of July 1944, the island was effectively in American hands. The fall of the pillboxes had symbolized the collapse of Japanese strategic confidence and the establishment of American dominance in the Central Pacific. Saipan stands as a testament to the interplay of preparation, adaptation, and human resolve in modern warfare. The fall of 17 pillboxes was not merely a tactical achievement. It symbolized the erosion of a doctrine built on rigidity, obedience, and static defense. American forces, through disciplined small unit initiative, integrated technology, and unyielding persistence, demonstrated that flexibility and coordinated effort could overcome even the most meticulously constructed fortifications. The human dimension was as decisive as any weapon. Marines endured relentless fire, exhaustion, and uncertainty, relying on one another to survive and advance. Leadership at the lowest levels became the engine of progress. Initiative, courage, and improvisation transformed the battlefield, converting calculated risks into tangible gains. Meanwhile, Japanese defenders embodied determination and discipline, yet their unwavering adherence to orders ultimately limited their capacity to respond to evolving threats. Strategically, Saipan reshaped the Pacific War. It provided a launch point for the B-29 bombers, bringing the Japanese mainland within reach and signaling that no geographic barrier could indefinitely protect the homeland. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. American confidence surged, while Japanese morale and command certainty fractured. The battle illustrated how industrial power, training, and adaptability could amplify human effort to decisive effect. Beyond strategy and tactics, Saipan offers a broader reflection on the nature of warfare itself. It underscores the tension between doctrine and adaptation, order and initiative, and highlights the immense cost borne by those on the front lines. The pillboxes, once symbols of immovable defense, became markers of human ingenuity overcoming static barriers. The story of Saipan endures not only as a military achievement, but as a study in courage, calculation, and the relentless pursuit of objectives under the most harrowing conditions. In the quiet after the final shots, the island stood scarred, but illuminated by the resolve of those who had fought and survived. The echoes of Saipan remind us that history is written not solely by grand plans, but by the determination, skill, and humanity of individuals confronting the unforgiving realities of war.